2, and go.
Hello, and welcome to episode 219 of Quarkus Insights. Today we're going to be talking about Quarkus and Hibernate and how you can use ORM and Reactive together with, well, we've got one advertised special guest, which is Luca, but we have a gate crasher as well, which is Franz.
And there goes Holly. I guess I'll take over from here. We have one real person that was scheduled and one photo bomber.
Yeah, we could just pretend Franz is Holly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was interesting. What happened there, Holly? Did a new dog chew your cord or something?
No, it was just network glitch. So I'm changing provider tomorrow, so we shall see. But speaking of dogs, before we get into boring things like Hibernate and ORM and stuff, before we started, when we were making sure all the technology worked, even though it didn't work, we had cat cam. So have we still got enough cats to be able to do cat cam?
No, mine is gone. He's in the other room now.
That's the nature of cats, is they disappear when you want them, and then when you don't want them, they're like all over the screen, licking the screen. Okay, never mind.
Screen, like,
yeah, I thought this was going to be like our best ever ratings because of the cats, but instead, Luca, you're going to have to do the work.
Luca was dangling a cord here, and my cat was like batting at the screen to try and get the cord.
Yeah.
Oh
well. So I guess to start off with, maybe shall we have some introductions? Maybe Franz, you can introduce yourself first, and then Luca.
Okay, so I'm actually one of the co-leads for what's related performance in Quarkus, and I mostly work on asynchronous and reactive stuff. That's why I was very interested to attend.
Yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Luca, and I've been working for the Hibernate team since I don't remember actually. I'm quite recent. It should be something like 6 months or perhaps 1 year. Anyway, it's not important. Currently, I'm focusing on the Quarkus integration, so hence this presentation.
Excellent. So let's jump into the slides, because I've been sort of watching this work go on in the background, so I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the interaction in between the Hibernate team and Quarkus. Let me start. I want to show you a few things today. Anyway, today we're going to talk about, of course, Quarkus. We're going to talk about Hibernate, of course. I also have the shirt, so you see, this is the official shirt of the team. It's very, very rare. And also we are going to talk about Hibernate Reactive, because we don't talk about Hibernate Reactive that much. Anyway, let me introduce you to the Hibernate extension, because you might not know if you see from the external side, but there is not just the Quarkus team. There is also the Hibernate team contributing to Quarkus as well. And we're kind of contributing to the Hibernate, what we call the Hibernate extension, which is called Hibernate ORM extension. And I must say that I think it's a very well built piece of software. It works perfectly. I mean, of course, I'm telling this because I'm doing this, right? No, jokes aside. No, it's a very
no bias whatsoever, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think that of course Hibernate is a very well-known piece of software in the Java ecosystem. It's been around for something like 24 years. That, if you think about it, it's a crazy amount of time, and people are still using it. And to be honest, I actually started working as a Hibernate developer. So even though it has improved quite a lot, in the philosophy, I think it's still kind of the same. So I mean, I think it's a very good milestone. And but it's with Quarkus that Hibernate shines, because the Quarkus team like set up a series of defaults, a series of way, and when you use it as a developer, it's very convenient. I remember having to use Hibernate. It was 16 years ago when I started coding, and it was a total different experience. Nowadays, with dev services and default and stuff like that, you can set up a Hibernate application in less than 30 seconds, and it all works. And to be honest, I'm quite fascinated about this. To me, it still seems incredible.
I'd probably say too many. There's probably a lot of developers who don't even realize they're using Hibernate, like not even in the Quarkus ecosystem, just in general, because it's pretty much the de facto standard JPA implementation.
Yeah, in fact, it's de facto. I wouldn't say just the standard JPA implementation. I would say like it's the standard de facto for accessing database, perhaps. Even though there might be some users still using JDBC, like directly. But I mean, I would use Hibernate for everything. And of course, I'm not telling this because I have the Hibernate shirt. But I still think it's a very good developer experience. But if you think about it, Quarkus is all about the developer experience, right? And this means because you have so many people working on it and like setting defaults. For example, let's talk about defaults. For example, we have good defaults in Hibernate as well. And most of the time, the good defaults that you get in Quarkus are mostly taken for Hibernate itself. And of course, if you use Hibernate without Quarkus, you need to have good defaults nevertheless. But sometimes the good defaults that we find in Quarkus gets backported in Hibernate as well. So there's this kind of synergy in between the two projects. And I think it's fascinating. Anyway,
sorry, Luca, before you go on, I was just going to say, because I think like Eric said, that probably not a lot of, or not everyone who's using Hibernate knows that they're using Hibernate. And I think certainly not everyone who's using Quarkus knows how closely connected the Quarkus teams and the Hibernate teams are, and how, just like you said, how much back and forth there is between those teams. And I think even in the sort of the origin story of Quarkus, I think there was kind of like a couple of parallel streams that contributed to it. But one of them was from Hibernate, and one of them was this sort of question of like, could we make Hibernate boot in advance rather than doing all of the work when you start the JVM? And that was kind of that sort of model spread from Hibernate to like, wait a minute, what if we made like all sorts of things boot in advance, and how cool would that be?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think it's working very good. And what I was saying, I forgot. Anyway, don't worry. It's constantly evolving. There are so many people working on it, and but I would say the bad thing is that we get many feedbacks in the form of bug reports, which of course we love, because when I receive a bug report, I'm actually happy about it because it means that somebody is using your software, right? And so this is very important. But the fact is that we never get feedback like, "Oh, I love to work with Hibernate on Quarkus." So it's either two things. Perhaps people aren't loving don't really love working with Hibernate in Quarkus, or perhaps it's working. I don't know. I think that people should contribute. People shouldn't see the Hibernate extension in Quarkus as a commodity. It's not. It's actually active developed software. There are so many people working on it. Well, let me introduce to you the Hibernate Reactive extension, because the Hibernate Reactive has an interesting story. So it was developed after Hibernate ORM, but we decided to kind of to do it fast. We decided to share a lot of code with it, and it wasn't necessarily the best choice. And in fact, we have still a lot of active development on it. But this means that the development of the Hibernate Reactive extension is going a tiny bit slower than the Hibernate ORM. And this is mostly because they're intertwined, they're coupled together. And but just to update all our users, I think that we're going to the right direction. We're kind of we're trying to solve the problem. And I'm really hope that we see good things in the future, but I can't tell anything because, of course, nothing is certain anyway.
And when you say it shares a lot of code, is that the sort of the copy paste kind of code sharing, or is that the sort of the reusing the common instance kind of sharing?
Yeah, I meant literally. No, I mean, yeah, there is both a hard dependency in between the two extensions, and there is some duplicated code. So there definitely is some technical debt. But of course, it was worth it because to do this, we had the extension faster. But of course, now we are in a situation in which the Hibernate Reactive extension is not yet ready. In fact, it's still in the preview phase. And to be honest, in the near future, I would like to move it to the next stage, if it's possible, of course. And
it's been in preview for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. We're trying to keep it at the same level of quality. And of course, it will take time. But the good news is that we're actually working on it. So if you're a user of a Hibernate Reactive extension, thank you very much. first of all, because we need your feedback. And of course, you see good things. For example, we just deployed I don't remember the version, but it's surely in upstream, the support for named persistent units in Hibernate Reactive, just to show that something that has been requested for quite a while. So why I'm telling you this kind of archaeology, I think it's interesting because knowing the story behind the project is always interesting. But the fact is that we had this feature that was missing in between the two. So as they were sharing a large amount of code, the problem is that they couldn't really work together. If you import both together, there was some kind of shared state, static fields and stuff like that, and it wasn't working as intended. And the problem with that is that, of course, we couldn't use them together in the same Quarkus project, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually is, because let's imagine that you're a user and you don't know exactly where to start, but you start with Hibernate ORM because you know Hibernate and you know how it works, and Hibernate Reactive has this strange syntax, so we see it together afterwards. Anyway, you decided eventually you might think that the Hibernate Reactive can work for you, but before Quarkus 3.22, you couldn't really try it in an easy way. What you could do is that creating a new Quarkus project, trying to find a way to share the entities in between the two, or perhaps copying and pasting, and this is complicated, right? And then create a new project, and it was weird. And of course, there was this kind of friction, and the friction would limit the adoption of the Hibernate Reactive extension. And of course, this is just my personal opinion. We see in the following months if it's true or not. But I must tell you that, you know where I'm getting to. Since Quarkus 3.2, you can actually use the both together. It took us a while, but I think it's a great milestone.
I'm going to chime in here too. I think this is an important point, because if you're doing reactive programming, I know like the JPA standard really only covers blocking in JDBC and whatnot. So there isn't really an ORM standard out there that I know of, at least in the reactive space. I know there are other projects that are trying to fulfill that, but there isn't really any one standard. And I think hampering on the fact that Hibernate can do this, and it's still a fully fledged ORM, not just a layer of mappers that map like a query to a POJO, is a big deal.
Yeah, most definitely. Anyway, I've told you that we get many bug reports, and of course we want even more bug reports, so please send us. And of course, I'm expecting that if people are starting to use Hibernate Reactive, then we'll get a few more bug reports. I would love to see an increase in the usage of extension. The best way to do is like get latest Quarkus or whatever version, latest version, stable version, and try it and see how it works for you. Because the situation before is that we were limiting Hibernate Reactive to those who actually already knew what reactive was all about. And reactive is can I say this is a strange beast? I mean, if you already know that you want to use reactive, you know, and you use it perhaps proficiently. But if you don't know it, I've been as a user, I've been in doubt whether I should use reactive or ORM in the first place. But the good news is that now we can use together, and now there is also this presentation in which I will try to address some of the concerns, and we'll try to give some answers on when you should use one or another. Okay.
And I think that fits our whole story in general, because when we talk about the reactive, Quarkus is fully reactive, but doesn't force you to do reactive programming. And you can mix and match even in the same class, reactive and blocking. And now that extends pretty much all the way from the front to the back and back again.
Yeah. Let me tell you that I'm not entirely sure whether Hibernate Reactive can be used in the same class as the Hibernate blocking, but I know it can be used in two different classes. So I think this should be enough for now. But of course, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I never tried, and not even tested.
Computer Science 101, you can put a layer of indirection in front of anything and solve a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what I wanted to show to you is the quick live demo on how this works, okay? So let me see if I can do this. I will stop screen sharing here. We tried this before, but we're not entirely sure whether it works.
Screen sharing is the hardest problem in computer science.
Somebody told
Except
me.
for printing.
And naming things. I think naming things is still the hardest, right?
Okay, so I'm sharing the screen. There it is. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, nice. So this is a very simple application. It's called Library, which perhaps it's an e-commerce for books. Perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's just a website for a library. And I've just set up a very simple skeleton. You won't see much in here. I just created the application with Quarkus Create App. And today we're going to create this very simple application using Hibernate. So let me start by adding the extension of Hibernate. Of course, I'm using Quarkus command because it's working fairly well. And I'm also using JDBC and I'm using Postgres. So it should be this one. Okay, if you don't know this command, it's a command line interface to do all the things Quarkus. And of course, I shouldn't have run it before anything because now it's fetching on the internet. Anyway, you have all kind of, for example, you have Quarkus extension help. You can do stuff like this. Anyway, I want you to use. Anyway, what it did is actually it added the dependency to the pom.xml, the Hibernate ORM and JDBC Postgres. So we're going to have this library resource, which is our endpoint of our library. And we're going to implement a simple crude application. So we're going to create some creation of books. So let me start with the entities now. I'm going to create the book first. And this is going to be an entity. Let's going to create an ID and name of a book, something like this. Of course, I'm using public fields in here just because it's easier. You probably shouldn't use public fields. Let's use title because I have notes and my notes is written title, so it's better. And but this is totally doable. If you're just doing, as I told you before, nowadays it's very easy to prototype with Hibernate and Quarkus. So if you're doing just a quick prototype, you can easily use public fields and it would be fine. It works. I tried it on Friday and this morning, so it should work. Then we have this customer thing, which is an entity as well. Is generated value, long ID, and we'll find that we'll have public string username, and it will have something like, I don't know, age of a customer, okay? So this is very basic Hibernate. This is not an introduction on Hibernate. I really hope that our users already know the amount of Hibernate that they need to do this. Anyway, you should read the documentation if you want to know something about Hibernate directly. So and let's support this, but first let me do this and try run Quarkus directly. And of course now it's slightly slower, and of course it's also not working because why it's not working? Because of course live demos. I'm sorry, you were saying? So can you see the terminal as well? This is the terminal running Quarkus Dev. And of course, now I won't spoil the rest of the demo. And if we do something like, I'm using this tool to do HTTP calls, so something like HTTP localhost 8080 library, which is the path that I'm setting here, and do something like books, I will get a non-supported exception. This is expected because we're doing this here. So let me do a very simple Hibernate thing. We're going to inject the blocking entity manager, which is called entity manager. And we're going to do a simple query. And while I'm writing the query, if you have any question about this, just ask. Select B from book B. Book. Get result list, and this is of course is returning book, and you can see now I can do the same request as before and getting an empty string because an empty list because no entities are inside. But you can see that the hot reload with Quarkus is working just fine, and I would say it's working perfectly. So let me try now to implement something that inserts books so that it's a bit easier to show something. So let me do this. This is taking a book and return book.id because it's a generated value. So now it should work. Let me try. I already tried before. So it will be something like post book. And then I don't remember what was the title. Yeah. So it was title like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So it should work. Yeah, I created and used an entity inside the database. And of course, if I do like this, I can get the book that I've just created. So this seems, to be honest, this seems like a very simple, a very stupid example. But if you think about the amount of things that is going on here, first of all, I haven't written any SQL to generate the tables. Have you noticed? But in fact, with the services, what it happened is podman exec. It was created a container. There was a container with Postgres because I decided to use the Postgres extension. And it has created all the schema for me. It has created book, the sequence for book order, and stuff like that because I haven't really dropped the database. And so if you think about it, it's quite a lot. And of course, if I change the entity here by, I don't know, adding another field to this entity, this automatically, what happened is that, of course, I lose the previously inserted entity because, of course, it has to drop the table and recreate the table. But actually, it's already working. And I don't know, to me, it sounds like magic. Because again, when I used to do this like manually, it will take me so much time. And here I can like try with different entities and different, especially it's useful when you're learning Hibernate, because Hibernate has not many concepts, but some concepts are kind of hard to grasp in my opinion, such as relations. And for example, many to one, one to many. If you want to experiment with the side of relations, stuff like that, it's complicated. So the fact that you can set up a very simple Quarkus application with Hibernate, it's fantastic. So let us move further. What I've told you before is that now you can mix the two, right? So you can use Hibernate Reactive. So imagine that you have this query, and eventually this query will take a lot of time, and you want to try Hibernate Reactive to see if it behaves differently. So what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to add the Hibernate Reactive extension first. And then I'm also going to add the reactive PG client, because I must tell you, perhaps it's not obvious, but Hibernate Reactive and Hibernate ORM use different clients to access the database. So now that I have the thing, I can start Quarkus again. I can create a new version of my library reactive. And now, of course, I'm going to have a new path, library reactive, which is not a very good name. And now I can inject the session factory of Hibernate Reactive and do something like this. And of course, I call this, library reactive resource. Let's call it, keep it clear. And what else? Let's try to do a reactive version of the get books. So first of all, you must understand that the reactive Hibernate uses a different API. So instead of returning a list of books, we are returning a uni of list of books. We see later what this is. And then we're doing something like this with session s, takes a closure. And this should work as intended. Let me see. So let me try this. Books as before. You see the hot reload always working. Library reactive books, it returns an empty list. So if we create the book as we did before, either if we search throughout the book or the reactive books, it works as intended. And this is quite nice. So
you created the book with the imperative
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then you were able to read it with the reactive one.
Yeah, this is a good question. Since this is a demo, of course, and we are making the JDBC drive and the reactive drive and point to the same database. But of course, you don't necessarily need to create things using the, I mean, if you want to fetch things from the database, you don't necessarily need to create entities using reactive. The entity itself are the very same, and the tables that we are using are the very same. And what you need to do is just choose whatever you needed. And if you need a Hibernate reactive method just for the fetching, then it would be perfectly fine. Yeah. But yes, that's what I did. Any other questions about this so that we can move forward on the theory, which is the interesting part?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm gonna, offline, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna try to put them all in the same resource class and see what happens.
Oh, we can
Well,
try.
I won't make you do it live because I don't want it to blow up on you.
No, but let's try. Let's try.
Yeah, I reckon it will work.
Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't.
The
Famous
last
last
famous
words.
word. Yeah, exactly.
Reactive books. Let me see. I mean, if Meta can do a presentation where nothing works, we can do the same, right? So again, I'm expecting not to see any books anymore because the library loads. Oh, by the way, this is called this way of.
Oh, and I guess that's what happens when you try.
Yeah.
Right? You get blown
Okay,
up.
never put it in the same class.
Otherwise, you get wiped off the face of the earth, right?
Yeah, oh, he's back. Let's bring it back.
So there's a couple of questions. We'll wait for Luca to come back. Hey, that was fun.
I'm
Don't try
sorry.
this at home, people, right?
I could actually hear from you, so it was just it wasn't on my side. I mean, or perhaps it was not. Anyway, I was telling that if Meta can do the demo with everything crashes, we can do the same, right? Anyway, I pasted the thing here, and of course the hot reload worked. And let me create the book again, and let me do library books and library. Oh no, this is now it's called library, but reactive books. Yeah, it works.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I told you. Yeah, it's a very good piece of code, and of course, I'm not telling this because I did it.
Yeah, you never had any doubts that it was going to work.
Yeah.
Right. So I got a question here. What about can you do async inserts? Like, for example, if you want to insert something into the database without waiting for the insert to finish.
Yeah, sure. I didn't want to give the impression that the Hibernate Reactive is just for fetching. It's just my demo that I'm using Hibernate Reactive for fetching. In fact, if you create, and of course now don't have the class anymore. Anyway, with the Mutiny Session Factory, you have all kind of API that it mostly mimics the API of Hibernate. Actually, the session returned by Open Session is the very session of Hibernate. So you can do whatever you want. You can do creation as well. And but the behavior is pretty different. And let's go to the theory so that we can see how it differs from the reactive to the blocking, okay? I'll stop sharing. If the answer was good enough, just tell me or not. Otherwise, if I don't receive anything else, I just stop.
And by stop, you mean stop answering the question, not disappear.
I stopped sharing my screen so that we can see. And I introduce you to the magical word of reactive programming. I mean, as good as I can. Okay, let me stop the screen and we can get back to this later if we have. So, again, why should you use Hibernate Reactive, of course? So this is a very good question. And to be honest, I've been preparing this presentation for quite a while, and I spent so much time like asking everybody I knew. So if somebody comes up, for example, Francesco in this call, if somebody comes up and tells me and asks me, like, Luca, why should I use reactive? What answer I should give? And the answer to this is it depends, right? Which is not an actual answer. It's complicated, right? So you need to understand that the ORM and blocking and reactive are two different technologies. They are based on the same core, like inside they're using the same Hibernate, but the way they run, they're very different. They both handle data access, but they do it in a very different way. So Hibernate ORM or blocking, we call it The extension is called Hibernate ORM, but sometimes we call it blocking, like opposed to reactive. So we do blocking and reactive, blocking. Anyway, Hibernate ORM is the classical threading, Java threading model programming that you know. Like you schedule things on the thread, you run things on the thread actually, and you can do whatever you want as long as you are on a thread. You can like create new threads. You can even use it with virtual threads if you're brave enough to use it. No, joking aside, it's perfectly fine. It works perfectly. It's pretty simple. I think that most developers that knows about procedural programming are familiar with the concept of a thread. You have a limited amount of thread on your machine, which of course depends on many things, on the architecture, on the CPU, on the operative system you're running it. You have a very limited, but everything works just fine. On the other hand, Hibernate Reactive is based on a model which is called the event loop model, which is taken from Vertex, which is taken from Netty, inside in which you have an event loop, which is a program that constantly runs. And sometimes, and most of the time, you have a different event loop for each CPU core. So you might have more than one loop, but sometimes you just have one. And the beauty about this is that instead of running the things on the event loop, what you actually do is you schedule application, you submit your computations to the event loop. And this means that you
The suspense.
in excess.
Yeah, suspense.
Killing me.
It was a GC pose.
I don't know.
actually.
You cut out at the exact right moment. You said this means, and then never
He must
told
have
us what it
he
meant.
blocked his event loop, right? He did
Yeah.
something.
Never
Yeah.
block the event loop. Oh.
I wonder if this Restream software actually uses Java or not, because it actually cheats to me, because I always hear myself and I always see the stream, while sometimes you don't get the stream. Anyway, I don't know, where was I? I don't remember. Anyway, when you submit things to the event loop, you have no guarantees that the things will be executed when you submit the computation on the event loop. But of course, you have sometimes it will be executed, and hopefully enough, it will be executed in a very fast way. But the beauty about this is that as long as you submit reactive computations to the event loop, you make sure that the event loop will handle all of this. This doesn't mean necessarily that you cannot block the event loop, which is something that you shouldn't do, because the event loop is the main loop of your application. If you block for whatever reason the event loop, nothing will work. Anyway, so let me sum up. So you have traditional threading model for ORM, and you have an event loop for reactive. And the beauty about this is that, again, if you have a very long computation, for example, it might be a query as well, the query might block the thread when you're running in Hibernate ORM in a blocking fashion. And you can avoid blocking the event loop if you're using Hibernate Reactive. And this is very powerful. So imagine that you have this very query, and for whatever reason, you cannot optimize the query, and it's very long. And it's fine. But the problem is that as long as users are accessing your application, that thread is being blocked. It means it doesn't scale. It means that if you have many users accessing to your application, and all our users are using the very same query, which is very long, you risk of running out of resources. In this case, your resources is CPU. But those CPUs, those threads on the CPUs actually, aren't doing anything. They're just waiting for the database. And it just doesn't scale. For this kind of situation, Hibernate Reactive might work better for you. Okay, so you might think that, okay, so the answer to the question is that if I have few users, then I should use Hibernate blocking, while if I have many users, I should use Hibernate Reactive. And this is not even true.
Oh,
I told you, it's complicated. There is no easy answer. And the fact is, and let me try to address later anyway. First, I want to talk to you about this blog post, because this blog post has been made by Clément, which is a member of a Quarkus team. You probably have already seen it in one of these Quarkus Insight.
yeah.
And
Oh,
I think
Luca,
this
are you? Do you want to share your screen for this bit?
I stopped. Oh, how much I've been talking without sharing the screen, because I thought I was
Quite a
sharing.
lot, but that was fine because you were talking, so we didn't need the slides. But I think we
Okay.
probably need the slides for this bit.
Oh, so I think that since I dropped, when I dropped, okay, so you can share the presentation. Anyway, there wasn't anything interesting. It's just the things that I talked to you about. Okay, so there's practical differences. But first, I would like to share this blog post, which was written by Clement, which is a member of a Quarkus team, as I was telling you before. And I think this article really explains well the difference between the traditional threading model and the reactive threading model, with, of course, the addition of a virtual threads, because this is an article on the virtual threads.
So there's a question. I don't know if it's the right
Yeah.
time to take it, but if you're using both,
Yeah.
the blocking and the reactive, what about connection pool sizes? How do you synchronize them, and should you synchronize them, I guess, or you talk to that?
Yeah, I haven't shown this in this demo because, of course, this demo, if you take a look at the demo, I haven't written any configuration file, which is, again, one of the powerful thing about Quarkus, but it worked magically. And but the fact is, actually, they have two different configurations. So since they're using two different clients, one is using the JDBC client and the other is in the Vertex reactive client, you have a whole different set of configuration. So you can set in per configuration. Even though they're working in the same application and you're exposing different, I mean, you're using the both in the same application, you shouldn't think as they're running in the same way. They're actually two separated things. I'm not sure whether this answered this question or not.
I guess I'll ask a follow-up. Would it make sense like to have the settings be the same, or is that a like don't do that because you've got reactive and non-blocking versus blocking? Do you have any pointers?
I mean, they're very different. Clients, reactive clients and non-reactive clients is pretty different. So I would tell, but I need to check, to be honest. I would tell that they should be, it's important for them to be kept different.
But even if so, the configuration, even if they're kept different, should the values of the configuration be similar, or should they be different as well?
It depends on the use case. As I was telling you before, there are very different computational models. You cannot just estimate all the parameters from one client from the other client, because they execute very differently. So let me get to you when I'm talking about performance, because this is what it's all about. Like, it all ties down to scalability, right? So as I was telling you before, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a few users, you should use blocking. If you have many users, you should use reactive. Because in fact, they're so different that the Hibernate Reactive has some kind of overhead while you're using it. In fact, if you're making like a very simple benchmark and you're benchmarking Hibernate Reactive and Hibernate ORM, you might see that Hibernate ORM is working better than Hibernate Reactive. So you would just assume that Hibernate ORM is working always better than Hibernate Reactive, which is not necessarily the case, because again, it depends on your use case. So the reason why it happens is, of course, because benchmarking is hard. And in general, all the performance thing is hard. What you want to do is, it all depends on what kind of computation the users are actually doing. If you're doing long-running queries, or if you're making this kind of operation that takes a lot of RAM or stuff like that. So if you're making CPU-bound queries, if you're creating IO-bound query, again, if you're using a lot of RAM, they're all different. And depending on this, it all depends also on the performance objective that you need to follow. Do you care about throughput? Do you care about latency? Do you care about scaling down when you have like so many users, when you need to push back and you handle back pressure? These are all very different scenarios. And depending on the scenarios, you might choose differently. So I would say that if you're doing prototyping, just don't care about this. But when you're actually designing and architecturing your production scenarios, you need to understand how my application will be used. There will be many users. Would I care about the latency of the user? Will I care about back pressure of this user? Because, for example, in Hibernate Reactive, you get back pressure, I would say, for free, which is not actually for free because you're always paying it. But of course, let's say that the default behavior is better than the blocking behavior if you have problem with backflasher. Okay. So another thing that I was forgetting, but it's very important. If you're resource constrained, so if you're running your application on a very small container, for example, and you only have 2 CPUs, reactive might work better than blocking. Again, what you need to do is to do what we call active benchmarking. I sent you a link, but if you search it on the Google, like active benchmarking by Brendan Gregg, you will see it. And what you should do if you care about benchmarks in performance in general is to create a benchmark that is as similar as the production scenarios. You should like run it for hours, not for minutes, like for hours. And while you're running the benchmark, which actively mimics the production scenarios, you should gather information on how your system behaves. And just by doing this, this is the only way to understand whether one case will fit your scenario or not. This is not, it's not an answer that we can do, okay? So let me sum up. Should you use reactive ORM? First answer, try it. Experiment with it. You might trigger a very specific scenario that we don't know, but you know that the Hibernate Reactive works better than blocking and the other way around. It's totally fine. Experiment with it, especially because now it's so simple to mix the two that you have no excuses to try one or the other, right? But there is another answer to this question, which is another answer to this question, which is actually another question. So should you use Hibernate Reactive? It depends. Does your code already uses the reactive paradigm? Because if you're already using a reactive blocking, a reactive API, of course, the reactive API and the Hibernate Reactive works better together. Okay, and with this, I'm going to show you a demo.
So while you're flipping, there's a couple of questions in there. So the first being, do we know if Postgres 18 async IO is beneficial for Hibernate Reactive, or does it take advantage of that?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know the answer to this question.
I actually followed the Postgre developers, and it's more related the inner working of Postgre DBMS. So it's making use of IO ring for its internal behavior, and it doesn't wait anymore for synchronous, for sync on disk, for example. But the external API of the client, which they should make use of a known semantic, won't change because the external semantic is the same.
Yep.
What is going to change is probably that you will get better performance on the Postgre database.
Yeah, and I guess the other question is, for if they had a requirement for a logging API request where you don't want to block the actual request, would you recommend Hibernate Reactive for that kind of thing? Or is it one of those it depends answers again?
Yeah, probably the answer is depends, but let me read. What would you recommend for logging every API request into database? So, I mean, your objective is to log every API request. Okay, inside the database. Okay, so you're actually making a logger. So you don't care about the database for your business domain. You just care about the database. The question went away when I was reading. Anyway, thank you very much.
Sorry. I mean, when I like this, I'd almost like bring Kafka in and throw these out to Kafka and let something read off of Kafka and write to the database rather than have every individual application do it.
Or it might be as well that an existing observability solution will meet that requirement, depending how precise you have to be in the logging.
Those are very good suggestions. First of all, Eric, the demo I'm going to show is something similar that you've told me. So you're lucky in this case, but I would say for this specific case, I would try reactive first. This is one of a few cases in which reactive seems like the perfect fit, because you don't necessarily, but of course it depends on whether you need consistency. Because if you need consistency and you don't handle things correctly, the problem with logins every request to the database is that you want to make sure that I'm sorry, you nerd sniped me. Now I'm going to think about this for quite a while. Anyway, the problem is that, yes, you're logging the request, but has the request actually succeeded or not? This is a different problem, right? You don't want to log the client asking for a request. You want to log the actual, I mean, the computation that has worked. So it gets complicated. But yes, if you don't want to block the CPU, then the reactive is your way. Try it and tell us if it works, okay?
But I think the thing to think about, though, if you're in a blocking endpoint, right, and then you bring in Hibernate Reactive, something has to subscribe to that, right? So you either have to block and wait for it, and that's a subscriber, or you have to build a subscriber. Whereas when you have a full reactive pipeline, the subscription already happens for you. So it's just kind of something to keep in mind. Something's got to trigger it to actually do something.
Yeah. It's not an easy problem, but if you solve it on Quarkus, just tell us and we'll integrate it in the next demo. So what I wanted to show, since Eric talked about integrating Kafka in general messaging with Hibernate Reactive, is a demo that is exactly on this. We're using the same demo as I done before, but instead of it's still the library, but we've improved quite a little. So instead of having just book and customer, you also have the book order, which is, this is a fairly typical idiom in Hibernate, in which you have a many-to-many and you map also the table, intermediate table in between the many-to-many. You do it because it's clear. You do it because you want to persist some more data inside the many-to-many. So you will have that as a book, as many book orders, and the customer will have many book order. Of course, it's a many-to-many. What we want to do is, the requirement here is pretty different. So we want to show that there is a service in which we want to integrate with, which is based on messaging, and it's based on a queue, for example, for which we have an endpoint in which we can publish things on the queue. And so it's some kind of advertisement that we receive on the queue, whether there is a new book on a book that needs to be advertised. And what we do is, like, when there comes a new book, we should check on whether the actual user has already ordered or not that book. Because, of course, if the user already has that book, you don't want to advise this very book to the user, right? It's not like when you buy things on Amazon and it will propose you a new dishwasher if you just bought a dishwasher. You want to avoid that, right? So you're mixing two different APIs here. One is the messaging API, which is still based on the reactive idioms. So it's still using unis and multis. And on the other hand, you're using Hibernate Reactive, which is normally is not based on reactive things. But of course, if you're using Hibernate Reactive, you have the reactive API. So to do this, we have this thing, which is called server-side endpoint. We want to stream from the server whether a new book has been advertised or not. But we want to filter this for the books that weren't already ordered. So this is the endpoint. And as you can see, the one that I showed you before is the emitter. So the one that will push the things on the queue. You see inject channel. And here in the endpoint, you will see here, this is the subscriber of the queue, in which you'll find the channel, of course, the sync channel. And by streaming book, by using this, you will find inside the books a multi containing the elements on the queue. So what we can do is like select, which is a reactive API, to say, I'm going to filter. I'm sorry, I want to select all the elements inside this multi, and I want to filter with when this new book is being already owned or not by the customers. So it will be something like has no previous order. And of course, I'm passing the customer ID and I'm cursing a new book. And this should be it. Let me return this. That should be enough. So let me start Quarkus again, because let me do a map and clean, because I actually changed the project quite a while. I want to make sure you don't need to do the clean, but of course, if nothing is working, just try doing a clean, because sometimes it works. Okay, so it started, and again, I'm mixing two different APIs. You can see this is the channel API, the API from the queue, the messaging, and this is the API from Hibernate Reactive. So now, in order to show you this demo, I'm going to switch to another window. So I'm sorry because today I need to ask Eric and Holly to continuously change the screen. I'm sorry about this.
Keeps us busy.
Yep, makes us feel relevant.
Yeah. It's a bit like, when you were saying, you were working on the reactive and, but then you had to ask what the reactive was actually for. It's a bit the same with us. We're here. What is our purpose? Our purpose is to push the button to make the screen show.
It is. You're doing perfectly. So thank you very much. So I've created this new, very simple application in which I can create, because of course doing this demo was fairly complicated, so I didn't want to show the demo with calling endpoints via the command line. So I can create customers. We have Leonardo, Luca, Francesco, all Italian names, because of course. And we have like Harry Potter 1 and Harry Potter 2, and there are 7 books, I think. So I won't create all the 7, and I also don't remember all the names of the books. So, and now I can create here that Luca buys Harry Potter 1, while Leonardo only likes the 2 and also buys the 1. Okay. And also I have, by the way, this application is written using HTMX, which is a technology that I love. And I wanted to show some code, but I think we're running out of time, so I won't show HTMX, but it's something I like. Anyway, if I go to the order, so imagine this is the detail. This is the order for the customer 1, which is Luca. Just bought Harry Potter 1. So now I expect that if I do like Harry Potter 2, or something like Harry Potter 5, I get like a new book is out, titled Harry Potter 5, the same for 6 or 7. But of course, if I do 1, and I publish, I don't get anything. The reason why I'm not getting anything is that I'm mixing the data that are coming from the queue with the data that I'm getting into the database. And of course, I'm checking whether I already bought the book or not. And this works perfectly fine. And I think it's a good example of mixing two different APIs in Reactive. And of course, I can do this quite a lot because it scales quite well. I'm just kidding, of course. So that's my second demo. Any questions?
We should ask about the code, because I think you're right about the time, that there's probably not time to go through it all. But is it available on GitHub somewhere?
Yes, I'm going to send the link, and I should show the link somewhere. Let me. It's on my GitHub, of course. It's the last thing that I worked on, but I'm going to send the link. So it will probably be inside in the description, right?
There was a question too about like observability, something from the Spring world, essentially where, with Quarkus and the OpenTelemetry extension has the OpenTelemetry JDBC, and you can turn on JDBC tracing down to the database. Does the reactive variant have something similar?
Yeah, I would suggest that. Is it the same question that Adam is asking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that that's the question. I'm reading into it a little bit, because FlexiPool is a third-party library. It's not put out. It's like something that sits in front of your connection pool algorithms, but it also provides all the tracing and whatnot, similar to what you could do with. There was another Spring library. I forget what it was off the top of my head, but essentially, with the Quarkus OpenTelemetry JDBC, you can turn on telemetry at the JDBC level, and it'll add metrics and tracing and spans and all that fun stuff through your JDBC calls. But is there something on the reactive side for that? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, so far I don't think we have any. But the good thing is that we work on everything that we read everything that you propose. So I suggested that if you have a very specific thing that you're finding in Spring that is not in Quarkus currently, just ask for it. And the worst thing you can do is that we tell you, I'm sorry, we're busy, we're not doing this now. But I mean, we definitely consider all of the things that you actually send us. So.
And pull requests as well, of course, because that's the magic of open source, is that if Luca doesn't have time, someone else might.
Yeah.
Are you volunteering, Holly? That's how open source works, right?
A, I don't have the time either. And B, this is not my area of expertise. We don't want my pull requests in this area.
And but yes, Holly, you're definitely right. I mean, we would love to see more contributions, but I think this holds for many open source projects that they don't get as many external contributors. But we actually get quite some external contributions. But yeah, I mean, I would like to show that the Quarkus and the Hibernate team are just open source teams, and you can find us online. You can chat with us. You can. I mean, of course, we are very busy, so we. No, but joking aside, you can send all the requests, and for example, on Zulip, every day many people asks for question, and also the question on how to use the thing. So I would suggest you to join the community, because again, you wouldn't assume that just because Hibernate has been around for 24 years is a commodity and it's something that you cannot touch. Is software being made by people, very talented developers. Of course, I'm not including myself in this, but I mean, in 26 years, of course, so many talented developers has developed it. And Quarkus is the same, but of course, this doesn't mean that you cannot contribute to it. There are so many things to do, trying, experimenting, from documentation to actual bug fixing or reproduce or stuff like that. So I always suggest you to contribute and join the community, because it's very important.
And it's worth looking for issues tagged good first issue as well, because in a project like Hibernate, where it's sort of so fundamental to the sort of the infrastructure of a lot of the world, it can be a little bit intimidating. You know, like I just said, to sort of go in and say, well, I'll just change this code. But some things are definitely more accessible than others, and teams will try and mark good first issues as good first issues. I think in Quarkus, I think we don't do that as often as we should, actually, but it's worth looking.
Yeah, for the Hibernate extension in general, we do it. We try to do it. It's mostly our colleagues that are very, very precise, and I really appreciate those. I like setting all the correct label. I'm not as good as them, but I'm trying to. I will get to it eventually. Another things that I wanted to told you is that I think that databases is something that is pretty much for everybody. I mean, eventually you will need to use a database. And I mean, I think that most probably every developer has inserted some data inside a database. So that's why Hibernate is so important, because everybody has touched it, whether they wanted or not. Or perhaps there is not the errors or expertise, but it's something that is really much needed. So the code is here. Yes, exactly. This is the code that I sent you. So I actually had a third demo, but I think we are getting slightly out of time. I'm not sure whether we have a 1 hour or not.
Yeah, we can push it a bit if you want to show the third demo.
Yeah, sure. So what I wanted to show to you. Okay, I also had a slide for this, but it's not really much needed. So let me show you the code directly. Share screen, window, live. Oh no, first I need to reset. So I wanted to show you this very nice feature, which is called Jakarta Data repositories. Okay. Of course, I pressed the wrong button. Now I can't listen anymore. Okay. So Jakarta Data. Jakarta Data is a new specification, and it will give you a new. Let me describe this as a new data layer access for Hibernate. It's a new API. It's different from what we have before, but if you're already a Quarkus user, you might have seen something as a form of panache, because there is definitely some overlapping in between Jakarta Data repositories and Panache 1. And in fact, for this very reason, for the new version of Panache, we are considering doing some merging in order to support the two, because of course, Jakarta Data will be part of a specification. It already is, and they will be supported outside of Quarkus itself, while Panache is mostly a Quarkus extension, so it's just for Quarkus users. But I think it's very powerful. So what it does, let me show you an example of a repository. For example, we have book repositories. So the only thing that you need to do a repository in Jakarta Data is this. Annotate this with a repository, and you get all kind of repository. But of course, if you want to extend from this class, which is called CRUD repository, which is very similar to Panache repository class, you will get all kind of different method already implemented, such as insert all, update, and where you find by ID, find all. It's very convenient because this is the kind of method that everybody needs to always rewrite, and they're always the same, right? Find by ID, find all, something like this. And the beauty.
Can I ask a dumb question here?
Yes,
So,
sure.
I mean, I'm not as familiar with the Jakarta, but I'm very familiar with like Spring Data JPA, where the delineation, like in Panache versus the way Spring does it, is we use abstract, we create classes that are beans, whereas here you're showing interfaces. Is when Quarkus sits on top of this, does it generate all the stuff at build time? Because I know most of the rest of the world is doing like dynamic proxying at runtime, and it's generating instances at runtime.
It's a very good question. I'm going to address it soon, because the magic of Jakarta Data Repository, which is not actual magic, of course, it's just code, is based on the Hibernate processor, which generates some code.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and the Hibernate processor, you might know or you might not know. If you have used Hibernate extensively, especially with criteria query, you would know that the Hibernate processor is the same thing that we use to generate the meta model, which is something that we use for criteria queries. I won't delve into criteria queries here because because it's out of topic. Anyway, what it does, the processor, is that you will find inside the target, I run the application so that I can show to you. For example, you will find here, this is the entity we created before, like book, and this is book underscore, is the static meta model, the one that I wanted to talk to you about. This is used for type-safe criteria queries. And of course, you will find also the repository implemented. So you will find the injection of, it's not an injection, actually, the definition of the stateless session, because so far, Quarkus, Jakarta Data is just based on a stateless session mostly. The difference between a stateless session and a stateful session is stateless session is a simpler version of the stateful session, and a stateless session will just insert things, and it's easier to reason about. Anyway, so it generates all the code that you need to do insert with all the handling, and using this means that you can inject it, and it creates everything that you need already to inject it in Quarkus, and then you can use, for example, this is the method that I wanted to show you before, like book repository. Instead of doing create, query, and the code that I wanted, you just use book repository, find all to list, and it's already implemented to you, which is very convenient. And
So nice.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying.
It's so nice.
It's very good. Yeah. Saves so much boilerplate.
Yeah, most definitely. There is a lot of overlap. Yes. I told you before that we are definitely considering this in the evolution of Panache. I'm actually part of the working group for Panache too. So, but I think you can give suggestions from outside the community as well. If you have any ideas on how Panache 2 should work out, just, again, write to us, and we're working on it, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah, we keep trying to schedule the Panache 2 episode of Quarkus Insights, but it keeps not quite being in a state where it's Quarkus Insightsable yet, but we will get there.
Yeah, I think we need Panache 2 before doing the Quarkus Insight.
Yeah, that's what Steph keeps saying. It's, very boring of them.
No, but joking aside, I know Stefan is a great developer. He's working on Panache 2, and I think the Hibernate team will help him in the near future. So perhaps soon we'll have something to show.
Yeah, I think everybody's quite excited about it, and sort of, we want it now.
Again, I would like to say we're not entirely sure. We don't get. I get people which are very excited about Panache, and but I don't get as many feedback as I would like to have. So again, if you're really satisfied with Panache 1 and you really like it and you really love it, just send us feedbacks. It's very important for us. Because definitely Jakarta Data repositories will be part of Quarkus in the near future, especially because the specification is evolving. So the new version of a specification will support even more operations. And so stay tuned. I think that's pretty much all from my side. Conclusion, I had a few conclusions. So upgrade to the latest Quarkus. It's worth it. We always fix things. We always improve things. We make new features. So it's totally important for you to follow the latest version of Quarkus. This is main point. Try Hibernate Reactive. Again, you have no excuses anymore to try it. If you think, except of course, if you're not interested in reactive programming at all, then it makes sense. I won't force you.
That's probably a decent excuse.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, just try it and see how it works for you. And again, use benchmarking, do performance assessment, whatever you want. You do active benchmarking and send us feedbacks on whether it works or not for you. And join the community. We have a community page on both Quarkus and Hibernate community. It's quarkus.io support and hibernate.org community. Anyway, if you search Hibernate community or Quarkus community, you will find everything. We are on GitHub, we are on Zulip, we are Stack Overflow. What else? YouTube, of course. And especially thanks to Holly and Eric. We have so many YouTube videos. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Luca. Super interesting. And yeah, thank you everybody else for your questions for Luca as well. And I think with that we can probably leave it unless there's any more last minute questions or anything from you, Eric.
No, I don't think so. I'm good.
Yep. Amazing. Thank you very much, France, and thank you very much, Luca. See you all.
Bye.